Dr. Joe Barry, when you're ready.
All right. Thanks a lot for the opportunity. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the kind of work that we're doing currently at NREL, largely under the auspices of Charlie's program, his Sunshot program in perovskite-based photovoltaic technologies. The first thing to, of course, say is that, I'm one of many people here at NREL who's engaged in looking at this. And again, largely our efforts are funded by Sunshot, in particular the things I'll be talking to you about today. But we also collaborate very intimately with our colleagues who are funded out of the Office of Science in a number of different programs. And we have collaborators both across the National Lab Complex, but also internationally. So the reason why people are excited about perovskite photovoltaics is, actually this slide should be hidden, so I'm going to skip right to the next slide, is because of their prominence on the NREL efficiency chart. The line down at the bottom, which is highlighted in, going back to this slide, the box here is basically a testament to the fact that we understand how to do the solar conversion task pretty well. And when this new material system emerged, it was very, very quickly able to essentially demonstrate performances that compete with other thin film technologies. And this is also a technology that didn't exist essentially a decade ago. So within that time, it's essentially got the kind of performance metrics that are required to be competitive in the marketplace. And if we think about what's required of any solar technology, this again kind of echoes things that Charlie has already said in the first section. There are kind of three critical elements that you have to have a successful photovoltaic technology. And this is really the cell side and ignores some of the other system requirements in terms of inverters and exactly how one integrates into the grid. But if we look at just the photovoltaic device itself, you have to have efficiency. And perovskites have demonstrated that efficiency already. So in that sense, we're okay. There is more headroom from a theoretical perspective, though. But the big questions then are, can you make this material in a scalable fashion, and can you do devices that essentially last for some long time? As again was highlighted by Charlie, there are silicon-based devices that have been out in the field for many, many decades. And that makes both the stability and the scalability question critical to understanding whether or not these materials will be successful as a photovoltaic technology. From the perspective of the basic materials, if we look across the range of different systems and how they perform relative to their theoretic limits, we can see that the commercially successful ones don't have to get especially close to their SQ limit to be relevant. And in fact, CAD-TEL is quite a bit a ways away from what it could in principle be doing. In contrast, silicon is very, very close to its theoretic limits. While there are other kind of technologies that are quite expensive, while they offer some performance advantages, they again sit relatively close to their theoretic limit. In the case of perovskites, one of the reasons why these materials are special is kind of highlighted here. These are very absorbing materials, so they're very good in thin film format. We can use extremely thin active layers to do the absorption for the solar photons. And in addition, if we look at the voltage performance of these relative to their band gap, they're again very, very good. And in fact, the only things that are better are technologies that are essentially so expensive they're restricted to space applications at the moment, as highlighted in the graph on the left of this particular slide. If we look at what these devices look like, this is kind of a typical device stack, and they are, sandwiched, and this is very similar to any other kind of thin films that you'll see. We use a transparent conducting oxide. In this particular case, we've got FTO, but ITO or dope zinc oxide of whatever flavor you might like could also be used there. We have a electron transport material or hole transport material that basically sets the asymmetry in the device, followed by the active layer, and then the conjugate of whatever is used on the bottom. If we're extracting electrons through the transparent contact, then we extract the holes towards the metal contact, or if we're extracting holes at the transparent contact, we extract electrons at the top metal contact. But we have those transport layers, and then we have an electrode on the top. So the challenge in this particular case is, again, to essentially manage both the photons and then the subsequent photoconverted electrons and holes out of the device. One of the other things that's kind of compelling about this particular material system is that, which in the structure is shown in this next slide, and I say solar perovskites because people who have worked on fuel cells and other applications know we've used perovskites for a long, long time, and it goes beyond this, but this is the structure, and again, most of the materials that we're talking about here are basically lead and tin alloys, and they are halide-based, so they use bromine, iodide, and potentially some chlorine, along with an organic acite, methylammonium and formamidinium, as well as cesium are used. And the ability to basically use these different substituents means that we have the ability to tune the optical gap, which opens up the possibility of accessing things like multi-junctions in addition to the one-sun kind of application. And on this next slide, this is some work that is now quite old in this particular field, where the tuning of the band gap has been demonstrated across A-site choices and across X-site choices. And more recently, there's been work that has demonstrated the ability to use the B-site as well, tuning the composition of lead versus tin. So critically, the other thing that we need, obviously, in addition to the stability, is scalability. And the reason why we're excited about these systems is that all the high-performance systems, that is to say, all the world records for the last probably, I don't know, year and a half or so, are all based around solution processed films. So all the top performers are basically made from ink formulations. And that opens up a lot of opportunities in terms of scalability. The one other thing that I've highlighted in this particular slide is the ability to use microstructuring or nanostructuring to also tune the optical gaps. So we have the full gambit of tools at our disposal for these solution process systems to tune the energetics and how they're essentially exploited in the device architecture. So this is the reason why we're excited about these. And to that point, we've demonstrated now, again in Charlie's program, that we can make relatively stable device structures. We have a long way to go to rival things like silicon, but we're on our way. And the fact that these are solution processable means that we can really talk about extremely low capex methodologies for producing this, like inkjet printing or gravure. The notion being that we should be able to use infrastructure that's very, very similar to what is used to print newsprint. And if we're thinking about displacing or electrifying exclusively with solar, we would want to get to something like 25 terawatts. And in order to do that with kind of existing silicon PV capacity, you're looking at 170 years to produce all those silicon panels. In contrast, if we were to do that with a technology where we can literally make the devices as fast as we print a newspaper, we think we can get to that much, much faster, something on the order of 3 years. So that's the reason why we're excited about this. And with that, I will conclude and take any questions that there may be.
All right, thank you, Joe. We'll wait a minute here and see if there are any question submissions.
So I see one from Robert regarding lightweight. Is that right? Should I comment on that, or should I just keep my? Should I just? So
I think that one was for Charlie.
Was for Charlie? Okay. All right. Then
yeah, we put that in his folder here. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Great. Oh.
We'll just give it another minute here, Joe, and see what comes in.
It looks like I have one in my folder. Now, it looks like the Robert one is for me. At least it's showing up in my folder. So these materials are extremely lightweight. They've been demonstrated with the highest specific powers of any PV technology, including 3.5s. The question there is exactly what the overall stack looks like and what the environment looks like you're going to be using them in, because they do have some known susceptibilities to things like water. I'm seeing something else that's related to the efficiency decrease for every 5 degrees C. That's an interesting question. I don't know that we have really, really great data. I think, again, our data to date would point to the fact that as a function of temperature, the biggest thing I'm concerned about, these are low formation energy materials, and as we elevate temperature, we open up the possibility of doing chemistry at interfaces within the device. And since the PV device is very much a interface-driven device from my perspective, that creates other problems. So I'm not especially worried about the active layer efficiency. Having said that, based upon the theory to date, calculations would seem to suggest that depending upon the details of exactly what your alloy choice is, you might actually be able to improve the efficiency a little bit as a function of temperature. So as long as you stay away from phase transitions, which are accessible at the kind of operational temperatures we envision for these systems, you should be okay. And in fact, we have demonstrated that you can go through a phase transition and see very little impact on device performance, at least as far as the active layer is concerned. Again, the interfaces are an issue. And that's work that we published. I want to say it was in ACS Energy Letters earlier this year. So we can follow up with an email and I can give you that reference. What are the prospects for broad commercial adoption? I'm a scientist, so you're probably going to have to ask somebody else. But I know that there's a lot of interest from a lot of companies, given the kind of performance figures we can hit with these materials and given the process methodologies as I kind of laid out in my talk. You know, our dream, our goal for this technology is to be completely transformational, to really change the status quo with respect to energy generation. That's, you know, a lofty goal. You know, there's all kinds of reasons to think that that won't be possible, but if you're gonna work on something really, really hard, you might as well go for it. This is kind of our perspective on it. Those are the 4 that I see in my folder, so unless there's anything else.
That's all that we have in there right now, Joe. We'll give me another 30 seconds of your time to see if anything else comes in. And if not, then we'll move on to the next speaker. Looks like we just got a follow-up here in the general inbox.
All right, let me click on that and have a look. What is the current state of the art for, I'm sorry, the question is off the thing. Let me see for printable solar cells. It depends a little. So generally speaking, all of these are solution processable. So the record efficiency as depicted on the chart of roughly 22% is kind of state of the art. Internally at NREL, we have published, I believe, the largest peer-reviewed printed device that we made with a scalable technique, which is blade coating, and we're translating that to slot. That produced a mini module at, I want to say it was 13.5%. That device does represent our initial attempt. We are now better than 15% for mini modules on kind of the 12 to 15 centimeter square kind of area, and we're rapidly looking to make that bigger. Cost of production for the module, that's, again, you know, we're not a commercial entity, so that's not exactly within the purview of what DOE, Sunshot program, Charlie's program has asked us to do. But we work with cost modeling folks, and that's an active area that we're engaged with them in. I know that there are a couple reports out in the literature with respect to cost modeling from, most notably, Toledo, I think, was the most recent one, which is not a roll-to-roll process that we would envision for something like the New York Times or Washington Post or New York Post style printing. but is more of a sheet-to-sheet approach, which would be a little bit more conventional. The cost numbers indicate that we should be able to have some cost kind of advantages, but those are accelerated at kind of lower capex type with lower capex type processing like roll to roll. Having said that, I don't know that anybody's demonstrated a fully roll to roll processable module. That's something that's clearly on the radar screen for us to begin looking at.
Okay.
So,
thank you, Joe. We're going to move on to our next speaker. Any other questions for Joe? Just keep them coming, and we'll file them away in his folder, and he can type in an answer. We're now going to move on to